Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we're looking at India's landmass, but we aren't just looking at some static map with borders and colors. Instead, I want you to imagine it as a fixed bank account. It's a strictly finite resource that a rapidly growing nation is constantly drawing from. Every new road, every new factory, and literally every grain of wheat we grow has to come from this exact same account.
All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Here is our agenda. We'll start by categorizing our land, look at the shifting landscape, examine common property resources, explore India's cropping seasons, identify major crops grown, and finally, confront the challenges in agriculture. We're going to take a macro to micro journey today, zooming all the way down from grand geographic principles to the daily struggles of the farmers working the soil.
Section 1. Categorizing our land. The boundaries of our bank account.
To truly grasp how we use our land, we first need to define the boundaries of this finite asset. I mean, how do we categorize something that has to serve over 1 billion people? Notice the different elements in a typical rural landscape like this one. Literally every single inch has a specific role. Some land is occupied by rivers, some by trees, some by grazing pastures, and others by human settlements. The Land Revenue Department actually maintains incredibly strict records of how every parcel is categorized, because different types of land are suited to entirely different uses. So, our first major category is barren and wastelands. Think of this as the part of our bank account that is currently locked up. We're talking about rugged, hilly terrains, expansive deserts, and deep ravines. With the technology we currently have available, it simply isn't feasible or economical to bring this land under cultivation. It's land, sure, but it's not actually productive for agriculture right now.
Now, what's really interesting is when you contrast that barren land with what we call culturable wasteland. This is land that has been left fallow or uncultivated for more than 5 years. It might look totally abandoned right now, but the key word here is culturable. Through modern reclamation practices, this land actually holds serious future potential. It can absolutely be brought back to life and added right back to our active balance.
And then the crown jewel, the net area sown. This is our most vital, productive core. It is the exact physical extent of land where crops are actually planted and harvested. Make no mistake, this specific category of land is the very foundation of the nation's food security. Without this core, everything else just grinds to a halt.
Section 2. The shifting landscape. Economic pressures on a fixed asset.
This brings us to a fascinating clash. What happens when a rapidly booming dynamic economy collides with a fixed amount of land? Well, the pressure builds in 3 pretty logical steps. First, the overall size of the economy grows. Populations boom, income levels rise, and technology advances. Second, the whole makeup of the economy shifts. Sectors like industry and services start expanding way faster than agriculture. And finally, massive pressure on our fixed land asset. You start seeing a gradual yet super sharp shift, especially around urban areas, where prime agricultural land is converted into building sites for factories, shops, and highways. Basically, the non-agricultural sectors are just outbidding agriculture for the exact same space.
Moving on to Section 3. Common property resources. Community versus individual. So while commercial and economic pressures are battling for land on a macro scale, how does land ownership actually work on the ground, at a community level? Look at the stark divide between the concept of private land and shared resources. On one side, we have private land. Owning land in rural areas isn't just about farming. It provides crucial social status and acts as a financial safety net for credit during natural hazards. But on the flip side, we have common property resources, or CPRs. These are owned by the state or the village panchayat. And this brilliantly illustrates how CPRs act as an absolute lifeline, especially for landless and marginal farmers. They provide essential community fodder for livestock, fuel for households to cook with, and minor forest products like medicinal plants and nuts. Without CPRs, the poorest segments of the rural population would literally not survive.
Which brings us to Section 4, India's cropping seasons, maximizing the yield. So here's a major puzzle. If our land is fixed and non-agricultural uses are eating into our farming space, how on earth do we feed a growing economy? The answer is time. We have to masterfully maximize the yield of the land we do have. Indian farmers pull this off through 3 highly orchestrated cropping seasons. First up is the Kharif season, which rides the southwest monsoon, making it absolutely perfect for tropical crops like rice, cotton, and jute. Then, as winter sets in from October to March, we transition to the Rabi season for our winter crops. Finally, there's a short, intense summer window called Zaid,
where farmers squeeze in quick catch crops, vegetables, and fruits. By stacking these seasons, farmers keep that bank account working overtime, multiplying the productivity of a single patch of dirt.
Section 5. Major crops grown. What fuels the nation?
Okay, we've talked about the when, but let's zoom in on the what. What are the specific agricultural outputs that actually fuel the nation? Notice the massive 14% slice of this pie chart, dedicated entirely to oilseeds. Crops like groundnut, soybean, rapeseed, and sunflower demand a huge portion of India's total cropped area. These are mostly grown in the drylands of regions like the Malwa Plateau and Marathwada. It really puts into perspective just how much of our arable land is dedicated simply to extracting the edible oils we use literally every single day.
And then when we look at highly specialized crops like sugarcane, the geographical concentration is just wild. Notice the heavily shaded region of Uttar Pradesh here. Get this, sugarcane occupies only 2.4% of the total cropped area in the country. Yet, from that tiny footprint, India produces almost 20% of the entire world's sugarcane. That makes us the second largest producer globally after Brazil. Uttar Pradesh is the absolute powerhouse here, single-handedly producing about 2/5 of the country's total output.
But we can't just look at grand maps and percentages without acknowledging the human element. Harvesting crops, whether it's cotton, sugarcane, or, as you see here, tea leaves, is intensely physical work. This reminds us that behind all those massive agricultural yields and optimized cropping seasons is a deeply, deeply labor-intensive reality. It is the raw physical effort of millions of workers that transforms these land resources into actual, tangible economic value.
Section 6. Challenges in agriculture. The human cost.
And that brings us to the most critical pivot in our explainer. We really need to step away from objective geography and crop stats to confront the severe, ground-level realities actually faced by the farmers themselves. Notice the crushing weight of these combined challenges. Modern agriculture requires extremely expensive inputs like specialized seeds and fertilizers, but marginal and small farmers simply don't have the savings for that kind of investment. To survive, they rely heavily on local moneylenders. And if a crop fails, maybe due to a bad monsoon or fluctuating markets, they fall into an inescapable debt trap. Combine this with the fact that agricultural work isn't always available year-round, leading to massive seasonal unemployment lasting anywhere from 4 to 8 months. So the crucial point is this: the economic pressure we discussed earlier is quite literally crushing the small farmer at the very bottom of the chain.
We've seen how our land is this fixed bank account, right? It's being pulled in a million directions by a modernizing economy, while the people working it are pushed to their absolute financial and physical limits. So I want to leave you with this. As our economy continues its relentless growth and the pressure on our land only increases, how exactly will we sustain the farmers who sustain us? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope it gave you a fresh perspective on the ground beneath our feet.